A man can spend decades building a business with the belief that one day he can sell it, walk away with millions, and finally have freedom. Isn't that what we all want, right? Then when he gets ready to exit and the truth hits, the business might not be worth as much as he was wanting it to, and actually far less than he thought. The buyer may see risks everywhere. The company may depend too much on them. And in some cases, it might not be sellable at all, which is the worst case there. And you're a trapped 75-year-old business owner that wanted to retire 10 years ago. This is a hard lesson to learn after decades of work. And the same kind of lesson happens with health as well. A business owner can spend years chasing growth, solving problems, serving clients, and carrying tremendous amounts of pressure while juggling family responsibilities too. And at this time, his body is keeping the score with rising blood pressure, cholesterol, blood sugar levels, weight, stress, lack of sleep, energy is plummeting, and all this shows up. Now, the goal is to build a business that you can exit from and a body you can live in when you get there, not just spend all your wealth on healthcare and someone wiping your behind. So today I'm joined by David C. Barnett. And David is an author, consultant, international speaker, a small business buy-sell expert. He has helped thousands of entrepreneurs understand the real numbers behind buying, selling, and investing in businesses. David has written multiple books on small business deals. He's got a YouTube channel that will be linked in the show notes, a podcast that reaches buyers and sellers around the world. So this guy knows what he's talking about. And today we're going to talk about the exit plan, about knowing your numbers, why assumptions can cost a business owner years of work, and how health has to be part of the conversation too. We are going to touch on David's personal health journey too, as he has had testicular cancer in 2020. He's experienced weight gain, weight loss, and how to rebuild his body so he can be strong, fit, capable. David, I'm glad to have you on.
Hey, Brian, thanks for the invitation. I love to talk about all of this stuff, and I can't wait to get into it with you.
Yeah, definitely. Let's set the stage. What is the one thing that you want the guys listening in to take away from our conversation?
Yeah. People think that a business is like a car or a house. And one day when you decide, oh, I'm done, I'm going to sell it, that suddenly you can just put it up for sale and someone will come along and buy it from you. The reality is that you could find that person, but if the business is not properly prepared for sale, the deal likely won't happen. Or if it does, it'll happen under terms and conditions that will not make you happy. It won't be a clean break at all. You'll end up tied up with the exit process, maybe even for years.
Yeah, I have a personal experience with this, not necessarily myself, but a client I was working with. He's in his young 60s, and we were about 30 pounds down, but he still needed to lose another 20 to 30. And he had just gotten out of shape, poor health from juggling consultancy business with defense contracts with the government. Now, what happened was he was ready to make definitely a solid 7, almost 8-figure exit. And he had one bad month in the mix of the year span that he was taking a snapshot before he posted to make that deal happen. And it cost him about 1 to 2 mil on the exit. And he was there for 3 more years trying to get out of it, tied in to make sure that because his name was on the billboard, right? His name was on the door. It was his name, consultancy. So yes, I have seen this happen more than a few times. But first,
you see,
go ahead.
Okay. Well, I was just going to say business owners who are in their business every day understand the business, understand the risks, and they've learned to live with them. And it's really difficult for a lot of business owners to appreciate that someone on the outside who is not as familiar with their business, when they look at your business, their number one worry is that you are trying to hide something, that something's really wrong, that they're going to have a hard time discovering that. And so when they start to realize that they are open to risks, both the regular risks of being in business, but also the risks of some kind of deception in the transaction, then they go looking for ways to mitigate those risks. And this is where they get they scrutinize very carefully, financial records. So a hiccup in the performance, like what you mentioned, would be something that would be causing fear for those buyers. And then they're worried that, something that is bad about the outlook for the business that you haven't disclosed. And they want to try to see if they can figure that out, because they're worried that you're trying to, pull a fast one on them. And this is why you get different kinds of deal structures that involve payments over time. And it sounds like this guy had to remain involved in the business for quite some time until the buyers felt that the goodwill really had transferred from that seller to them.
Exactly. Right. That acquisition cost for him was, he had less pressure because he wasn't the man writing the checks, but he still had to show up every day. And he actually was working now instead of he was the boss for so many years. And so that's a change of pace as well. Now, let's jump into some of the health stuff. I always like to start here because that's what we're talking about. Driven for Health is the name of the podcast. And I talk a ton about health, fitness, nutrition, lifestyle. And you've experienced some hard health issues, but you're out on the other side feeling strong, confident, taking care of yourself. So let's talk about what some of your health journey has been and the things that you're doing to proactively keep yourself as healthy as possible.
Sure. Well, I've always been a guy who was working out and being active, let's say, going on long hikes in the woods, camping, going for a walk when I felt bored outside, that kind of thing. And, I probably was carrying more weight than I should have been. I was probably around 225 pounds through the mid 2000 teens there. Yeah. And I'm 6'2". So,
you can make that work a little bit, but.
Well, and the thing is, you kind of deceive yourself, right? Because if you wear the right shirt, you look okay. And but really I had a little bit of extra weight on. And I took my kids on this big, long adventure trip. We were gone for about 5 weeks. And when we were in an accommodation, it was actually an RV that we had rented for a couple of days in the mountains. I was taking a shower and I felt a soft spot, like a sore spot on the side of one of my testicles. And my first thought was, did I walk into a countertop, sometime today? Like, did I bump something without really noticing? And you kind of shrug your shoulders and you're like, it'll be fine. And then about a week later, I felt it again. And I thought that I was back from the trip at that point. And I thought, you know what, this is how some guys get into a lot of trouble. So called my doctor. I got in about a week after that. She examined it, she poked at it and stuff and said, I don't know what's going on inside. My concern was, is this cancer? And she said, there's this condition where the vein going into the testicle can kind of start going varicose. It can be painful. Mm-hmm. It could be that, she kind of had a list of things that it might've been. Right. And she said, really, we need an ultrasound. So a few weeks later, I went to the ultrasound. The radiologist's report was kind of inconclusive. There was not really anything that he could tell. And so then my doctor said, look, the only option I have is to refer you to a urologist. And she said, I live in Canada, by the way. So she said, right now in the city, there's like a year wait to see a urologist, but I can send you 90 minutes away to the next city and you might be able to see one in about 4 weeks. And I said, I don't mind driving. So she sends my file off to the neighboring city. And it was a very experienced urologist who took one look at the file and fired it right back to one of the urologists here in town. And I got a call a week after saying, come on in, we want to see you. Right. And so this urologist here in town examined it. And he said, look, my first question was, is it cancer? And he said, I get a lot of that in here. I don't think it is. But we don't know what's going on inside, the testicle. There's nothing we can do to repair a testicle. All we can do is like ultrasound you every 6 months. And if it gets worse, we'll take it out. And by this time it was getting worse and it was starting to be uncomfortable when I was driving a car, if I sat in the wrong way. And so I said, look, I think it's going to be a problem. We should probably take it out. But I questioned him. I said, am I going to have any kind of problems with like testosterone or anything like that if I lose this? And he said, no, your other one's going to be able to handle things just fine. So this again was now January of 2020. And I got scheduled for what they call an orchiectomy. That's what they call it, for April 2020. Now, if you recall 2020, there were some big events that happened there that spring. And when all of these, travel restrictions and public health rules started to fall into place, The hospital believed that they were going to have a big rush of all these people with these respiratory problems. So they stopped doing multi-day recovery surgeries. And what they did is they looked for people in the schedule that were going to have quick 1 day in and out kind of trips. And I got a call on March 27th saying, hey, we can handle you tomorrow. Be here at 9. And so I actually got the surgery done a couple of weeks early. And a month after the surgery, the urologist called me up and he said, I got good news and I got bad news. And he said, the bad news is it turns out you really did have cancer. And the good news is I took it out of you. So, it was a feeling of relief. I don't like to lump myself into the cancer survivor camp because, people are suffering with the anxiety of knowing they have this terrible disease. I never knew. So I didn't have that quite hanging over me. I did spend the next 5 years in an observation program. So I was going for blood tests every 3 months and a CT scan every 6 months over the course of the 5 years that followed.
So things didn't get worse.
Yeah, well, and it turned out I was fine. In fact, 3 years into that program, I qualified for a new life insurance plan. So I was back and things were good. But the post-surgery, what started to happen is I started to grow more and more lethargic. And so I really didn't have energy. I started to slow down. And as we got into the fall of 2020, all I wanted to do, honestly, Brian, was lay on the couch, eat potato chips and drink beer. I kind of lost all my ambition for being outside, for exercising, especially as the days started to get shorter. And of course, my thought immediately was, I have some kind of testosterone problem. This, surgery has created a problem for me. And so I started to do a little bit of research online. And what I learned is that your testes actually produce testosterone, and they use vitamin D as a precursor to that. And so I was reading some articles talking about how if you feel the symptoms of low T, maybe you just need more vitamin D. So I went to a pharmacy. I had a conversation with a pharmacist, started to supplement much more heavily with vitamin D. And within 2 weeks, my entire attitude, my feelings, what I was craving as far as food entirely changed. I went from that beer and potato chip appetite to seeking fresh, crunchy, crispy things, like looking for a salad and good, wholesome food. And then it's when the weight loss started. So the top most weight I was at was 244. And a year and a half later, I was 171 pounds.
Yeah, that's a significant difference.
Tremendous weight loss. And then I had to start to rebuild. So then it was watching macros. I downloaded a calorie counting app.
Put a pin here real quick.
Sure.
And just say that anyone listening in, even myself, could be in the exact situation you were. You just woke up one day and things felt off. And we don't know if or when or how or what it is, any certain body part that you might have that can come down with something as really horrible and terrifying as cancer. Or you go and get your blood panels tested one time finally, you just like, all right, I'm going to go to the doctor and listen to my wife and do it. And then you've got red flags everywhere, like a really bad day at the beach. But it's... especially when we're in our 40s for the guys and 50s, the risk of disease and something trying to take you out is significantly more than when it was when you're 20. And therefore, it is important to make sure that you are going to the doctor, that you are taking care of yourself, that the average age, I do bring it up on this podcast a lot, is 76 for the average male. So 40s to 50s, you're 50% done, or 60, and that's not an exciting fact or percentage statistic, but it's the truth. And again, that risk goes up. So gentlemen, just going to throw out one thing here: go to the doctor, get some checkups, make sure things are going all right, especially if you have not been taking care of yourself. in some way. You're overweight, you're overstressed, there's lots of pressure, you haven't been as active as you once were when you were in high school. And if that's your default pattern of behavior or thinking, is like, oh, I used to be an athlete back in high school. Like, well, that's many moons ago. We need to
Yeah.
get some tests in. So you had the health scare, you got the surgery, then you realize it still wasn't in good shape, and we have this change of tune in your life and how you started to do that. So I talk a lot about how to maintain long-term successful weight loss here. So what did you do to lose the weight and be able to keep it off? Because you look great.
So it does feel great. It was a two-step process. So step number one was doing the things my mother always told me I shouldn't do, which was stop snacking at night and stop eating junk food, things that are clearly not good for us, right? If you feel hungry, count to 10 and ask yourself, are you really hungry or are you bored?
Yes.
And should you have a handful of potato chips or should you eat a banana, right? Like what should you put in your body? So I got down from 244 to 200 just by limiting my window of eating. So skipping breakfast, doing the intermittent fasting thing, not having anything to eat after about 7 p.m. and just being strict about that. And
so
I used to
controlled his calories, people.
Yeah.
Whether he fasted or not, that's not the important thing. The important thing is he practiced portion control, and he gave himself boundaries around when he should or shouldn't be eating in his day, and that worked for him, which is great. Because then he was able to repeatedly do it, which keeps him in a calorie deficit for a long time, which allows him to lose a pretty decent amount of weight and be able to not make it super hard. Okay, I'm just going to push, in quotations, breakfast off, and then I'll just make sure I'm not snacking after dinner. Pretty simple.
That's all it was. And there were a couple of times I got stuck, like I plateaued.
Of course, yeah.
And what I did to get over that was I did just a 1 day fast. Okay. And then as soon as I did the 1 day fast, it's like it kickstarted things again. Yeah. But when I got down to 200 pounds, I still knew that I needed to lose a little bit more. That's when I first downloaded a calorie app. And that's when I learned my notion of portions was out of whack. Yeah. I thought I was doing like healthy snacks during the daytime. Like if I was hungry, instead of the potato chips, I'd grab like a handful of almonds. But then when I got the calorie counting app, I got a food scale and I realized, oh my God, I'm eating 600 or 700 calories worth of almonds a day. Right. I had no idea just how some of these calorie dense foods are,
Exactly. And I love this, David, because you started off with low hanging fruit, pun intended. Yep. And then you got more skilled at and more complexity as you went. And that's oftentimes what I do is, what's the next best thing for this person? And in the programs I've ever run with people is what is their tolerance? What are their abilities, their skill set, their knowledge, their desire to do whatever that next step is. And it might just be walking and drinking more water or eating vegetables, or can we stop eating after dinner? Those are very easy things to agree to for someone to start making better choices for themselves. And this is great because you realize, okay, I've got a roadblock here. I need better skills. I need to understand more. And you started tracking. And that's oftentimes what can happen in my world is people, if we're not having progress, then yes, you will be tracking because you are eating more calories than you're supposed to lose weight. Doesn't matter how healthy the food is or whatever, it's a problem. So kudos to starting off easy and realizing, hey, I need more skill. And this is going to pair well. This is a good foreshadowing of what we're going to talk about with buying and selling and exiting and all this stuff of having skills to be able to get the outcome that you want. So keep going. I love this so far. So good.
Well, in addition to that, I did a trip. I went to Europe, and when I came back, my clock was all off, right? I was waking up super early in the morning because of the time change. Yeah. And I woke up one morning at 5:30, and it was springtime then, so the days were long. So the sun was already up here, and I just thought, I'm going to go for a walk. Yeah. And it stuck. And so since 2022, I've been getting up at 5:30, 6 a.m. and going for a walk to start my day. And I usually walk for about 90 minutes. I usually get my 10,000 steps in right in the very beginning of the day.
Wonderful.
Come
Check
back.
that box.
Yep. Come back and, have a cup of coffee and then get to start my work day. But the walking has been consistent. And I always worked out with weight resistance before, like for my whole life. And I've continued with that. So I've got a regimen of twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, about 35 minutes of weight training. And then on Sunday, like a 75 to 90 minute sort of longer, full workout. And that's it. And since I hit the bottom weight, back around 2022 or so, I've been focused on macros and making sure I eat enough protein, and then it's like rebuilding myself the way I want to be, which is, much leaner, more muscle mass. I feel great. I look much better at the beach. And it's really rewarding. If anyone's out there thinking, oh, geez, it's a lot of work, as soon as you start to lose some weight, you become self-motivated because you realize, hey, I'm making progress. And then somebody brings out, like some, I don't know, crazy kind of cake or something that you used to like. And you say to yourself, I've worked so hard to get where I'm at. I don't want to sabotage myself.
In that cake that I'm
right. It's like, just give me the cherry on top. I'll just eat the cherry or whatever. Like, you realize it's not worth sort of flushing your progress down the toilet for a slice of cake in the moment. Yeah. And so the discipline is self-reinforcing.
Yeah, your identity change. The way you think about how you interact in social settings is now different. It's changed from what society says. Oh, it's someone's birthday. We should have pizza, ice cream, and cake, and whatever else. And that's just because what society that you do not have to do that to celebrate someone's birthday. So
it's true.
House,
it's true.
We like to travel a lot. We still do ice cream, but we travel a lot, and that's what we have done for people's birthdays in our house for our kids and our wife and I and all. So
these cards here, these are sort of like daily affirmation cards. I put stuff on them to remind me of what I want. And there's one in here that's been in here now for 4 years. I'll show it to the YouTube viewers. If you can read, can you read that?
It says, I look like that.
I look like this. And it's a picture that I found on Google Images. It's just a male model that kind of has the same sort of facial hair as me, but he's definitely fit.
Yeah. I see
and so I look at this guy and I say, I look like this. And I ask myself before, eating something, I'm just like, would that guy be eating this?
Right.
And the answer is often no.
Right. And one more thing on this is it's who you surround yourself in these situations that influences what you do in the first place.
Yeah.
So if you showed up to a birthday party with fitness folks, there's probably not going to be cake there anyways because it doesn't align with what their general goals are. But in this situation, and normally there's cake and ice cream and stuff, and it just is. So there's lots of different reasons things are what they are, and food is love and happiness and sadness and all sorts of different things. But we can have a different identity, different relationship with it as we change our identity and develop skills. And sure, if you want the cake, you can have some, but we are going to make other choices in the day and do what I call the 3-lever system. We've got movement, we've got food choice, and we have portion control. Those are it. That's the basics of taking care of yourself. So let's shift into the basics of selling and what you really do good at. And that's why I have all these guys coming on to my podcast, is to expose my audience to subject matter experts, and David stood out. And here we are. So let's jump into the levers of why taking care of yourself is important, especially when it comes into building business and being able to exit business and all.
Sure. So let's think about most people's perception. We mentioned a little bit earlier that a lot of people think that their business is an asset like a house or a car, and whenever they want to sell it, they can just put it up for sale, right? And I spent a career as a business broker, and then I did that for 3 years. I sold 36 companies. And then I got out of that because it's a terrible business, by the way. Ups and downs in cash flow, and you only get paid when a business is sold, and deals fall apart at the last minute all the time. I went into banking afterwards for a few years before coming back into the space. And my current business model is that I'm a consultant. So I work with buyers and sellers. I work with them on their deals. I don't work for commission. I just charge fees for the work I do with people as they go through the process. So when buyers look at a business, they look at that business and they ask two questions. And the first question is, what is the demonstrable, sustainable cash flow? And so what they're looking for is they're looking for actual documentation of profitability over the course of time that is fairly regular, because they're likely going to want to use a bank loan to buy your business. And if the cash flow is irregular, like if you made $1 million 1 year of profit and then 200,000 the next year of profit and then 250 the year after that, and you lost some money the following year, no banker is ever going to agree to make a loan on that business. There are ways to sell them, but again, it's not pretty from a seller's point of view. So the buyer wants to see the demonstrable cash flow, and then they're going to ask themselves the next question, which is, will this cash flow continue once I'm the owner? And that's when they start, that's when they start to examine, are the people actually loyal to the business or to its current owner? Are the systems in place for me to be able to do what the current owner is doing? Am I going to be able to take over the operation? Most businesses that are sold to individual buyers who are going to go in and replace the current owner in their day-to-day management role. And so, which is in complete opposition to what you read online, which is that businesses get sold to private equity groups and they convert to ESOPs and they get bought out by strategics and all this kind of thing. Those are abnormally successful deals that make great news and great stories and great things for people to talk about on podcasts. The vast majority of businesses that get sold transfer from one owner operator to someone else who's going to run it and operate it just the same way. And the number of businesses that actually successfully change hands is not that great. So the best data we have says that about 1 in 5 businesses are actually able to transition from one owner to another, which means 80.
I'll take a little quick here. I am actively seeing this with another client right now. That client works for the father, a financial advisor business. So they manage people's funds for retirement, investing and all. And then the client works for dad and manages business and all the back end stuff. Dad's the face, right? But then they bought a wine company off of a family friend, and it's interesting to watch the whole process of them doing their due diligence, looking at all the ins and outs of the back end stuff, of assessing the cash flow, of assessing what the profitability is and how to make that, say, next jump and to get even more profitable, and what do they need to do. And so I'm watching this from this wine seller, and sure, they're really excited about going to Italy to buy wine and get wined and dined and have wine evening out to taste testing and all this stuff. But also they're also there in the evenings or in the weekends picking up deliveries of and moving pallets of wine randomly whenever this truck shows up and all too, and making sure that someone else can then deliver the goods to the place that they sell to. So it's a very interesting to see that they did just do this in the last couple of months. And I believe because of my client, they're very good at business managing, that they will be successful because they did their due diligence. They understood what they were buying. They understood the opportunities. They are recruiting the right type of people to then make it profitable and successful and grow their networking relationships and all. So I do foresee that it turning from a lifestyle business that the older owners had, and they would just write off trips to Italy and bottles of wine and stuff, and just maybe make some money on it, to actually doing something with it. So
yeah, well, so here's where we want to attack assumptions. Is like the first assumption is just I can sell it.
Right.
And so number one, what is the demonstrable regular cash flow that you can prove and that the buyer can prove to their banker? That's the person who really has to be convinced. And number two, can you show them that they're going to be able to run the business? And so a lot of businesses can't meet those targets. They can't jump over those hurdles. And so those are the ones that don't get transferred. Where people stumble and get trapped in these businesses is that they just make the assumption that they're going to be able to sell. And then they also make an assumption about what the business is worth. And here's the problem. They start to plan around the assumption. So I spoke to a conference of financial planners. You mentioned someone in the money business. I spoke to a conference of financial planners, and one of the biggest problems in their industry is that they meet people that are 40, 45 years old who maybe own a business, and they create a financial plan, and they'll ask that person, are you going to sell your business one day to help fund your retirement? And the answer is usually yes. And then the financial planner might say, well, how much do you think you're going to sell it for? $1 million, $2 million, $5 million. And then they put it in the plan. And now they've got a financial plan based around a transaction that could occur in 20 years' time without really knowing if the business will hold that value, if a buyer could ever be found, et cetera, et cetera. So what I caution business owners about is that, number one, that small business is very risky. And as a result of that, they tend to sell for very low multiples of cash flow. The most common comment that I hear from business owners when I show them what their business would likely sell for is they go, that's crazy. If I just owned it for a few more years, I could have the same amount of money. And in every case, they are correct. People don't sell small businesses to cash out like Mark Zuckerberg cashes out of his Facebook stock. The benefit of having a profitable small business is not ever in selling it. It's in owning it and collecting the profits as you operate the business. People only sell a profitable small business when a pressing personal concern is actually forcing them to. So these are burnout, boredom, and fatigue, divorce, poor health, the need to relocate, or a plan for retirement. And because of that, what ends up happening is people become very present oriented. They start to make the decisions that, cause their tax bill to go down. They try to put money in their pocket. Maybe they put some personal expenses in the business. You mentioned all the, family trips to Italy in the wine business, right? So they start to do those lifestyle things because they want to maximize the benefit today. And then one of those personal pressing concerns appears, and suddenly now they have difficulty demonstrating the cash flow of their business because they didn't operate it in a way that was preparing for transfer. And this is one of the key things that I want to get across to people is that 80% of the time, the reason you will sell your small business is not for retirement. It's for some other thing you never planned for. Now we're talking about health, and health is one of the big ones. Is somebody gets a health condition that causes their situation to deteriorate, and they realize, I've got to get rid of this thing. I don't want to leave it to my heirs, or I don't think they can manage it, or what have you. And they suddenly have to sell. You can just imagine under those circumstances, you become a highly motivated seller, which is not a good thing.
No, I remember trying to offload my house back in the day.
Yeah.
And I was willing to take it's like a 25K hit. And the house wasn't that expensive in the first place. It was my first house. But the times there was no one buying. So fortunately it didn't sell. And we ended up finding a renter. 5 years later, it sold for $40K more than what we bought it for. It was during like the COVID wild times of real estate and such. So we completely lucked out there. But yeah, we couldn't give this thing away, and we were very motivated to offload it because we wanted to move on to the next phase of life.
Yeah. And that's what happens with sellers as well. They need to move on to the next thing. What I recommend people do is I recommend that 10, 15 years before you plan to retire, get your business evaluated. So this is one of the things I do with my clients is I do what's called a most probable selling price evaluation, which is not the same as what a business appraiser would do for a tax problem or something someone would do for a court if you're in a legal dispute or something like that, or a family law thing. It's what would it really sell for if it was put up for sale in the market. And that's going to give you an idea of what you've got, and it can help to inform the decisions you have going forward about how you're going to manage that business, how you're going to replace things. Maybe you have to buy equipment or something in your business,
or upgrade your employees and their skill sets.
Well, here are some of the surprises that people get. Okay. You know, they'll if they realize the business is worth far less than they ever thought. Sometimes people then realize, well, the whole selling it to somebody is probably not even a plan open to me. Right. And so once you realize that, then you make a whole different plan. You start to plan for retirement like employees do. You're saying, well, I need a savings program. I need some kind of investment strategy. Sure. Maybe I'll buy an apartment building.
15 years, then you can build a 401k or whatever as a retirement vehicle.
Right. So you have a timeline. If you learn that the business could be worthwhile because of its cash flow, but there's a transferability problem, then you can spend your time working on the transferability problem. Mm-hmm. People will get stuck thinking there's only one way to get out of the business. And basically the better you are at preparing your future, the more different pathways open up in front of you. So some of the other people I've worked with have squirreled away millions of dollars in their retirement accounts and other investments. They own the businesses producing cash flow, but they don't need to sell it to fund their retirement. When you're in a situation like that, there's so many more doors. This is where people get into things like, I'm going to transfer it to my employees, or I'm going to transfer it to someone who's going to put more of an emphasis on, the role the business plays in the community and maintaining my legacy in this community and keeping the headquarters here and stuff.
Place that I was referencing, the father, he's been grooming a younger gentleman to take his place and transfer at a certain time because he's near 60 and his protege is 30, young family. And so it'll be a natural, and they've been working together for, I don't know, a good 10 plus years. So there's trust and all this stuff. And then they just brought in another advisor to help out with extra workflow and bring in more. So the older gentleman, the owners, is working on ways to develop the people to transfer and to create his exit in that sense.
Well, what you're describing and what happens in financial planning firm and other professional practices too, like law firms and accounting practices and things, it's the problem of transferability because people go to those practices because of the individuals.
Exactly.
So the senior gentleman, he built the practice, he met those people, everyone trusted him to do their investing, etc. And now if one day they called that office and somebody new answered, someone 30 years younger, how would they feel? Right? Would they keep their funds there? Would they be happy? Like, it would be a problem. And so the exit strategy for that kind of business is exactly what you described. You bring on a junior person, you work together over a long period of time so that all the customers get a chance to develop a relationship with the new person. Right. And then, I describe this as the transferring of goodwill. One of the tools I use when I'm doing a business analysis is one that I developed called Locus of Goodwill Calculator. So it determines where the goodwill resides. It's either in the owner, the business's brand, or the location. So if you think about a local corner store that you might stop in to pick up a few things, you don't need to know who owns that place. You just want to know how late they're open, right? And the owner could change all the time and you won't care. As long as they're open, you know where they are, the service is good, the product is there.
Reasonable.
Yeah. Well, the other end of, well, yeah. And you could even argue that part of the goodwill of that particular business, a corner store, is the location.
Yes.
Like the business could change its name tomorrow, but if it sold the same goods, most of the customers wouldn't care. Right. And so it's one of those three things, the owner, the brand, or the location. And so we calculate that by scoring different questions to show people, because if you're heavily weighted in one of the three areas, it gives you a different sort of roadmap as to what kind of work you need to do to make sure your business ultimately becomes saleable.
It's me. I'm the
absolutely.
It's just me. There's nobody else. I'm working on building a personal brand, hence what this podcast is for, and all the extra social media promotion and different things that I've been doing lately is to build awareness and build that personal brand that everyone talks about online and such, to then create more know, like, and trust, to then win over business and produce more transformations, to then maybe in 5 years I have a actual business that produces client results, but
Well,
I might not necessarily be the main feature 100%. There'll be a team and a back end and different things to support.
it's possible. You just have to look at people like Tony Robbins, right? At some point in his career, people called up Tony Robbins and they spoke to Tony Robbins, like that he was the guy.
Yep.
And then there was an evolution there. And now, if you do training from Tony Robbins, you don't expect to talk to Tony Robbins,
Right.
right? You know, you're going to talk to some other person,
Right.
but that was a very intentional journey, and a lot of work on systems and training, and
Yes.
creating the roadmaps,
I've had a
etc.
Tony Robbins coach before in the past. Back
Okay.
in 2011, I had a Tony Robbins coach, and it wasn't Tony, but at that time, the running bill was $1 million a year, and he had a wait list a mile long. I was
Wow.
thinking what it was when I just remember that off the top of my head. But yeah, you weren't going to talk to Tony unless you were.
Was it helpful to you at the time?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it was a lot of. Certainly, I remember at the time we talked about business, but then we also talked about life and how that intersected. I was a young family, like super young, so it's like 2 to 3 kids under 5, basically, and juggling a very full schedule. I mean, I literally woke up at 4 a.m. and would go to bed at midnight, and juggle trying to create this business to be profitable, and it was work. That's for sure. I learned a lot. I've talked about it in other podcast episodes, but it was definitely tough. That was a business that could have potentially sold because of the formation of it. It was a gym, not based around Brian or the other owner or any one of the coaches that were in there. You came because we offered transformational results and people loved it there. I mean, we had 300 members when I left, and on a reoccurring membership, so it was doing very well. And then I left and it crashed and burned.
So what ended up happening? Was it the programs being offered fell apart, or the way that the customer experience?
Well, there was just a lot of distrust all of a sudden, and the other person just wasn't. I did a lot of buffering. I didn't realize from the business guy, and I was the coach guy, and the business guy just was just not that nice and just wasn't as personable or forward facing to the clients, and he was just mean to other coaches, and there's a number of different things, but in general, it's the easiest way to say it. So the trust and the quality started to feel like it was lacking. So when someone's paying $150, $200 a month for a gym membership, you're like, yeah, I can just go somewhere else. Plus, at that point, CrossFit, it was a CrossFit gym, they're becoming big and mainstream. Where when we started it 2 years prior, we were one of the very few on the block, and all of a sudden it started getting crowded. Multiple gyms that could.
I noticed the saturation.
Yes.
Even here where I live, there was one, early CrossFit place, and I think they did really well, and then I think it grew to 6. Now there might be 3.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And so people come, try it, and depending on their experience, they love it. It's okay, or they got hurt because they either had not great coaches, But that was the experience. But that business, we did 2 years. We collected $750,000 off of a startup gym, which was pretty good. We were running a $50K a month when I left, and 300 members on reoccurring $150 to $200 monthly memberships, and it was thriving. So that would have been a profitable gym to be able to sell if it were maintained the saturation of the market and the people cycling through, going through that program, right? Because it was CrossFit, then it was Orange Theory, then it was boutique little workout places and all these different phases.
Fitness is really driven sometimes by fads, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like the next big thing. It's one of the challenges.
45, it's spinning things pop up. I'm not sure what the big thing is right now. I can't put my finger on any one mass thing that's just taken over. It was like Peloton was, I guess, one of the bigger things, but that also has faded quite a bit.
When if you talk about franchises in particular, you named a couple that are there that are franchises. One of the warnings that I give to people, actually, do I have a copy of it here? One of the books that I wrote in 2014 and updated last year was called Franchise Warnings. And one of the things I talk about in that book is examining the timeline of the growth of the franchise, because for most franchisees, they've got to have a certain net worth to qualify with the franchisor to be a part of the brand, right? And then if they go and they have to take a retail location like a gym would, often like, they're leasing.
Planet Fitness, it's a $2 million buy-in, I believe, or it was the last time I remember it.
So you got to have net worth. You got to be qualified at the bank, and you have to sign a commercial lease. And the most standard commercial lease out there is a 5-year term, often with renewal periods. But if you're getting into that business, the franchisor, they're taking a royalty of your sales. So whether you make money or not, you still have to pay royalty fees. And so what will happen is if you have a whole bunch of new locations roll out, they may not be profitable, but people are still keeping the locations open because it's more cost effective for them to keep financing their losing franchise than to close early and then suffer the personal guarantee from the landlord or the bank, right? And so I caution people, when you see a quickly growing franchise network, you want to know how many locations have been open for more than 5 years and how many of them are still owned by the same owner. Because the other thing that franchisors will do is they'll encourage people to turn them over, to sell them to other people, because they don't want the locations to close, because it's when the location closes they have to disclose it in their FDD that they had a closed location. And that's sort of the beginning of the negative spin on that brand. And you can literally talk to people in the franchise industry who will describe these explosive growth arcs in some of these brands. They're successful at marketing, but then they don't get a good track record of success with their franchisees. They don't get the renewal of the locations, and they end up fizzling out. So it's that, especially in areas like fitness that are heavily fad driven, it's like a tiger by the tail situation. As long as you can hang on, you're probably going to do well, but then the rules can change at any minute and suddenly demand dries up. It's all business is risky.
Social media that changes things super fast.
Yeah.
Let's talk some stories. Tell some stories about people you've worked with where let's go both roads, where the one person came to you and, wow, this is a gold mine, let's do this. And then the other one is just like, yeah, you're going to be 75 still owning this thing, or just wrapping it up and taking whatever out of it that you can.
Yeah. So the number one thing, like for people that are going to buy a business, the business brokerage industry talks about these different cash flow levels, seller discretionary earnings, EBITDA, and what those are is they're not real levels of profit. They're just these what we call notional cash flow levels that are designed to allow you to compare one business versus another, ideally in the same industry. And so what will happen is people that aren't that familiar with business or financial statements will think that those numbers are profit. Like if they buy the business, that's what they'll end up with in their pocket. But it's not the case, because out of that notional cash flow level, the discretionary earnings, for example, you've got to do your debt service. You have to take home a salary as the operator. You have to pay taxes. You got to cover CapEx. One of the big traps that I see gym owners fall into is that they'll buy all new equipment for a new gym, and then they don't make a proper allowance for the renewal and replacement of that equipment. And what will happen is it starts to get old, it starts to get dated, and then somebody opens a new gym nearby, and now all of a sudden that's the attractive place, right? And then you lose the customers, and it's because they don't understand, like, even though depreciation is a what they call a non-cash expense, it still costs money to buy a new machine, right? Yeah. And
Right.
in many businesses that require like trucks and forklifts and all that other kind of stuff, like that's expensive stuff that has to be acquired.
Right.
So my caution for people when they want to get into business through doing an acquisition is you really should know something about the industry that you're looking at buying into. So because if you are completely new and you don't know anything about a given industry, and you get the successful LOI in there and you're going to buy the business, one of the questions I like to ask people is, why are you so lucky? If this is such a great business, why are you the guy that gets to buy it? Why, if the plumbing business is up for sale, why doesn't another plumber in the next county buy it? Why aren't they, falling all over themselves to buy it?
Right.
Because there are naturally better buyers for certain businesses, and some industries are very naturally set up for strategic acquisition. This is some of the things that business owners should be thinking about. And I'll tell you a great story that comes from the gym space. Here, where I live on the east coast of Canada, there was a gym chain called New Bodies, and they had like 15 locations. And there's a big national gym chain here in Canada called Good Life. And the New Bodies people wanted to sell their chain to Good Life. And they went up to Toronto and they made a presentation. And the Good Life guys were like, we operate hundreds of locations. You've got like 12. It's really not big enough. We can't really put the effort into doing an acquisition until you have at least 25 locations. So what these New Bodies guys did is they started to build new locations. But as they needed to replace carpet, they replaced it with the same color carpet that Good Life used. And when they started to need to buy new machines, they bought the same brand of machines that Good Life used. So they literally built what looked like Good Life locations with their name on it. And when they got to 25 locations, they went back to Toronto and they said, hey, we're ready for you to acquire us. And you don't have to do anything except change the signs,
Yeah.
because we've got the right color carpet, we've got the right brand of equipment, and they literally grew themselves into the perfect acquisition target
Super smart.
for that big company. And of course, the Good Life couldn't say no, and they did a deal. And
Made
now
an
all of
offer,
those
couldn't refuse.
locations.
Like, all right.
That's right. And so
That's
so
brilliant.
you as a business owner, part of the advantage of doing a most probable selling price evaluation is that's the kind of discussion that would be explored. Are you in an industry that is ripe for this kind of consolidation, what they call roll-ups, where people are going to want to buy multiple locations and put them all together into one company? And so if that's the case, there could be things that you could do to make it easier for yourself. So, for example, auto repair. There are a couple of big common software packages in the auto repair industry. If you're not using one of them, you are going to make yourself more difficult to acquire
Right.
than an auto shop that is using one of the common software packages. Because
Yep.
if the buyer is already in the industry and they're familiar with the software, then that means it's going to be easier for them to take a look at your numbers and figure out what's going on in your business. And that preparation, making yourself transparent and easily examined for the buyer's due diligence is really, really important. One of the other exercises I do quite often with business owners is I will provide them with a due diligence checklist. I actually built an AI tool that you can put a real business name into it, or real business name. It will research the jurisdiction of that business, the industry, etc., and create a due diligence checklist. So if it's like a plumber in California, it'll have everything about the licensing required for plumbers in California, and all of the banking stuff, all of the financial stuff, the tax stuff, like everything required. Sometimes these due diligence checklists can stretch over 100 items. And I've handed this list to owners and told them, like, you should have a place where you're gathering this stuff now, because if you actually got into a negotiation and you sold your business, you might be given 2 weeks to gather all that stuff. I've had some people tell me they've decided they don't want to do a deal to sell their business because of the due diligence requirements.
Right. It's
They
just too much
they
work, right?
they just don't understand what is ahead of them, because it is the most thorough examination that anyone could ever come up with, because
Right.
people are borrowing money. Like once somebody borrows $1 million at the bank to buy a business from someone, that's it. They owe the $1 million. So they're going to do whatever it takes to try to manage the risk as best they can. And that means asking for every single little thing. And here's the worst part. It's not that they're asking because they want to read it and file it away. They're looking for further questions when they go through the due diligence items. They're looking for things that don't quite add up or cause other questions so they can come back to you and ask for more
Right.
and get clarifications, etc.
And ultimately ask for less when it comes to sell.
Well, if they find a bunch of problems, that is typically what happens. Is they'll come back at the end of due diligence and they'll say, "Look, you told us this, we found this. You told us this, we found this. You didn't tell us about this, but we found it. And here are our concerns." And so the renegotiation could be after you've spent 90 days or even 180 days in this due diligence process. And then you're committed. You've spent all this time and effort, and you have now legal and accounting expenses too, because you've had to generate a lot of this stuff. They'll come back and they'll say, "Look, we either have to reduce the price or we have to change the terms." And by changing the terms, what I mean is you're not going to get all the money on closing. So they're going to want to pay you over time. Or, maybe you agreed to finance 20% of the deal. Maybe now they want you to finance 40% of it because of due diligence. And so being prepared, knowing what the business is worth, what the due diligence is going to look like, what the likely terms of sale are going to be, all of this stuff is incredibly valuable, but you don't want to learn it 90 days before you decide to sell. No. You want to know this stuff and start preparing yourself years before you want it.
Right. Yeah, and to your sake is, if the intention is to sell, then we need to get you to start doing the things that will then be able to make it sellable for what the reasonable amount would be in the marketplace, so that you get the retirement from. And
or you learn that it isn't going to sell for what you thought, so you can create another plan.
Exactly. Yep. There you go.
And give yourself options.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Excellent. This is good. This is really good. I don't have my business set up to sell. That's not been on my brain. The last decade has been spent with my family. We've traveled a lot, giving my kids lots of opportunities. I end up stop working at whatever time, any given time, to be able to support family and do things, or take kids here or pick them up there. And that's been a big, important part. And a lifestyle business ends up being what I have created so far. And as the kids grow older, they could change to be something different. But it's definitely afforded a wonderful lifestyle.
Listen, I'm on the same plan as you, because I raised two kids as a single dad, and so I needed to have flexibility in my time too, which is why have been self-employed for the longest time. And that trip I was on in 2019 when I discovered the problem that ended up leading to cancer, that was a 5 weeks. Sorry, I think it was like 29 days or so. It was a cross Canada train trip. So it took 7 days for us to get from where we live on the East Coast out to Vancouver. Nice. We spent 3 days there. Then we took the train back to Jasper, and we spent 4 days between Jasper and Banff in the mountains. Yeah. And then we spent 5 days coming back. And that was 2019. And if we hadn't done that trip in 2019, it never would have happened, because the following year, with all of the stuff that happened, it never would have happened. Right. And my kids were 11 and 12 at the time.
Probably loved the train, and this is all about it, right?
The memories that we created were just outstanding. And I was working in this business by myself, and part of my routine was posting on social media every week, with some videos and stuff that like my YouTube channel has been going for 12 years. If you want to see chubby David, just go to the old videos. But I remember I set all of that up in advance as drafts, so that when I was on this trip, all I needed was a Wi-Fi signal or a cell signal, and I could go and make them live. And so none of my audiences ever knew that I was away on this big trip. And it was So worth it. And I kudos to you for choosing to make their childhood and their experiences your number one goal, because it's going to pay off in spades, because they're going to develop into responsible, healthy people.
That is the
And
goal.
that's what you
Bold,
want.
confident, independent people that don't
Yeah.
rely on dad, or at the very least, I always think of this, and I'll share this with others. Is hey, if you can lead yourself and your health and your family and show up and all, I do not want my conversations with my wife when my kids are in their 20s to be about my kids needing money, being in needy relationships, going nowhere with their careers, if they even have careers or jobs and all. I do not want that. I need them to be bold, confident, independent people so that they can take care of themselves ultimately, but they still love and appreciate their parents and realize the opportunities that we have given them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is, I think, at the end of the day, why you have a business anyways is to afford a lifestyle that creates the outcomes that you're after. And for you and I, it's family. And for other people, it's money or other things that mean success to them. And that's okay. Everyone can have a different viewpoint of what means to be successful for them. And, but this is mine right now. Excellent, excellent. Well, Dave, let's wrap up. Where
Sure.
can we find you? What are, I guess, what's one closing remark for you on business selling and taking care of yourself and all of these things that we've been threading together on our conversation today?
Yeah. I think it's about risk. So, small businesses are risky.
Yep.
The things we do every day, the food we eat, the activities we partake in, all have risks associated with them too. And if you have a lot to live for, people counting on you like your children, you have to think about managing those risks. And people don't think about it, but when you stuff your belly full of bad, empty calorie food, you are heightening your risk for a bad thing to happen, a heart problem or whatever. And you know, it is not okay to be obese. That is not healthy.
No.
And you have, even if you're not obese and you don't do any exercise, that's still not healthy. You got to keep your heart pumping. You've got to do what you can to try to maintain your health. I used to work with a coworker who was always exercising. He drank a bit too much, but he ate pretty well. And he had a massive heart attack, and he ended up having to be taken to a special cardiac trauma center, which is an hour's drive from here. And he made it there, and they performed the surgery and saved his life. And the doctors said, if you weren't in the shape that you were in, you never would have made it here. And that's the kind of sort of savings account or investment account you make when you take care of your health, is that you have the opportunity to have better outcomes when something bad does happen, and you're able to recover more quickly from things. It's an important, like, if you wouldn't miss a business meeting with a potential new client because you think you might be able to make some money, then you shouldn't be missing your morning walk. In my book, it's exactly the same thing.
Agreed. And that's the part that really resonated with bringing you on in the first place, is you recognize the importance of taking care of yourself, and when you do it right, you plan the most important things for yourself early when you're undistracted, and then you have all the other things in your time and schedule and all to then work on, say, the business. So you check the box on your health, and then you don't have to worry about that a meeting getting booked over your gym appointment later in the day, which is nice.
And what I used to have to do at one point to be motivated to do my workouts, because after a workout, everyone feels great,
Oh,
right?
of course. Yeah,
But
totally.
before the workout, you might have a voice in the back of your head saying, "Do I really want to do the workout?" So what I used to do, Brian, is I used to schedule time in my calendar for the workout, and then immediately after, I would put a 15-minute appointment that said, "Feel good about the workout."
Yeah.
And when I saw them in the calendar, it would just remind me, yeah, I need to do it because I'm gonna feel good if I get it done.
That's so good. I've never
And
heard that. That's really
I,
good.
I don't have to do it anymore, but I did that for about a year and a half, and this was when I was much younger. But it got me on track.
Yeah, that's just such a, say, a ninja move. I've not come across something like that, but you actually plan for the outcome, scheduling the time for that. So it's like, as you said, it's a reminder when you look at it, you're
Yeah,
like, oh yeah, that's right. I will feel good as doing this, because it's not always easy. I myself don't always want to do it, and I try and stack the deck in whatever way and favor I can to want to do it. So
yeah,
excellent. Excellent. So, well, where can we find you? Certainly,
sure.
everything will be in the show notes. What's
Yep.
important for you to where to send us and what to look at, books and all that stuff.
Well, if people are interested in this small business deal making stuff, just look up David Barnett Small Business in any podcast catcher or YouTube. You will find my channel. I've got almost 1,000 videos out there
Oh
right
yeah,
now.
you've been
But
doing
for the business owners out there, if you want to dig more deeply into what it's really going to be like when you decide to sell your business, if you go to howtosellmyownbusiness.com, that's a page where I talk about how I work with business owners. There is a free download there for the second edition of my book, How to Sell My Own Business.
it.
And it's a PDF. It's like 100 pages, small 6x9 pages. You can read it in a couple of hours, but
Yeah,
it actually takes you through the step by step of the process, what really happens, what how buyers are going to look at your business, how they're going to value them, and what the common terms of sale are. And it's not what you're hearing on the media and podcasts and stuff like that. The vast majority of businesses that change hands, it's not nearly as exciting as what you see on these big fancy shows.
right, right. Yeah, the more subject matter experts that I have on the show, that's the undertone that I hear from a lot of them as well. Even a gentleman I'm going to be recording with tomorrow, there's some real estate, and he's like, yeah, HGTV is not it. I said, oh, it's good to know, because my wife, back in the day, I don't know, 15 years ago, HGTV was big in our house. Like, ooh, we're gonna flip and we're gonna da 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 da. It's like that's not quite how it works. There's some learning lessons in there if you want to do it that way. It's all good.
Well, I think the lesson is they know how to make entertaining and engaging television.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Excellent, David. Thanks so much for coming on. And if you're listening in, and the things that David talked about are real important. A lot of guys are listening in, and people I work with are business owners, entrepreneurs, and have some form of ownership, because they realize that's really important. And owning things is how you get ahead in life, pretty typically, especially with financial success over time. So you have to own things, and you have to be responsible for things so that you get to the outcome that you want. And there's skill development, and there's all sorts of different things that come in that process. And even where David was saying, there's opportunities from of wide range of different ways of exiting a business, and it could be from a traditional sale or a transfer, or turning into an investment opportunity, that when it's time to close up shop. My dentist, he had health issues and he is done. I have to go find a new dentist literally now. I do not have a dentist. My dental appointment was November 20th or something, and that doesn't exist anymore. So I have to go through because of health issues for him. And speaking of that, is why you need to be taking care of yourself anyways. Along the road, the journey is life, not a destination, right? We've heard that from Aerosmith and beyond. Is life's a journey, not a destination. And we have to be preparing yourself on so many different angles and different ways to be successful. So take care of yourself so that you can then take care of the other important things in your life, from your relationships, your family, your kids, your assets like a business or a home, and real estate and whatever else. So that will be it for us today. Take care of yourself, guys, listening in. You'll be able to find David's stuff in the show notes. Please check it. I mean, if the guy's done 1,000 YouTubes, I know what that looks like, feels like. He's put in a lot of work, and there's probably thousands of hours of him talking, laying out golden nuggets on this stuff. So you can really get into his bubble and get a lot of knowledge growth, and go to his website to grab his book and continue with getting into his bubble. So that's it for this session of Driven for Health. Thanks so much.
See ya. Thank you.